On a Saturday afternoon in Crossmaglen in the 1970s, a Gaelic football match could be underway at St Oliver Plunkett Park, home of the Crossmaglen Rangers, when the roar of rotors drowned out the crowd. A British Army helicopter would drop onto the grass beside the barracks, dust whipping across the pitch. The players kept playing. The game didn't stop. That was the strange arithmetic of the place. Crossmaglen, Crois Mhic Lionnáin in Irish, cross to the people who live there, XMG to the soldiers who dreaded it, is the largest village in the south of County Armagh, close to the border with the Republic. Its square is broad and open, lined with shopfronts and pubs, the traditional heart of town life. For the best part of 4 decades, that square was also the centre of a British military fortress. It began in 1970, when troops moved into the Crossmaglen RUC station as the Troubles escalated, then took over the adjoining GAA pitch to expand the base. In July 1974, the authorities compulsorily acquired part of the club's grounds and built a helicopter landing pad. Irish state papers from December 1977 explain why. Because of the security situation, access to the Crossmaglen base was almost exclusively by helicopter. The reason was the roads. Every approach to the town ran through some of the most heavily mined, most heavily ambushed countryside in the entire conflict. For most of the Troubles, the British Army couldn't safely drive its own supply trucks into Crossmaglen. Crossmaglen wasn't the deadliest place in Ireland. Belfast saw far more deaths, and Derry too. But for the British soldier, pound for pound, this small border town was the hardest ground in the United Kingdom to hold. And that was true because of the place itself. A fortress planted on one side of the town square, roads too dangerous to drive, a hilltop ring of watchtowers, a community that gave the garrison almost nothing in the way of information, cooperation, or respite. This is the story of one town that spent 30 years being the answer to a question. What does it actually mean to hold the most hostile ground in the United Kingdom? To understand Crossmaglen, start with the arrangement on the ground. The base didn't sit outside town like a conventional barracks. It sat on one side of the square, a compound of 2-story-high corrugated steel walls, topped with concertina wire and hung with camouflage netting, masts rising above it. Troops slept in bomb-proof underground bunkers. The effect was of a fortress dropped into the middle of a village. The soldiers had their own name for it. They called it the Alamo. The open ground in front of the walls was where the danger concentrated. Patrols moved through the square in quick, exposed dashes, doorway to doorway, because the crossing was a shooting gallery. The army's own nickname for that open ground was the killing field. 17 soldiers were shot or blown up on the square during the Troubles. The buildings around it carried bullet holes and scorch marks for years. The most visible symbol of the garrison was a small, fortified observation post on the edge of the square, built in prefabricated sections and flown in by helicopter. It was named for a teenage soldier killed in that same open ground. Private James Barucki of the Parachute Regiment was 19 on the 8th of August 1976, walking back from a foot patrol, when an IRA radio-controlled bomb hidden in a bicycle basket detonated in the square. The post became Barucki Sangar, call sign Golf 50, so that every soldier who climbed into it would know exactly what the ground had cost. On the 12th of November 1993, a slurry tanker was driven up to the Sangar and used as an improvised flamethrower, setting the post ablaze. Behind the walls, the layout stayed constant through every rotation. The helipad at the rear, the Sangar at the front, bunkers in between, and a garrison that changed with the units sent to hold it. The Royal Fusiliers, the Grenadier Guards, the Parachute Regiment, and, at the very end, the Black Watch. Time magazine counted around 110 Royal Fusiliers manning the post, in a town whose population, even today, numbers around 1,500 people. A base this exposed needed a lifeline. The lifeline came from the sky, and the reason it had to was the ground. South Armagh is a landscape of low drumlin hills, narrow lanes and thick hedgerows. Ideal ambush country, and the Provisional IRA's South Armagh Brigade made it their own. Between 1970 and 1997, that brigade killed at least 165 members of the security forces, 123 soldiers and 42 RUC officers. The roads became the battlefield. The signature weapon was the culvert bomb. Explosives packed into the drainage culvert beneath a road, command detonated as a patrol crossed overhead. On the 9th of October 1975, a culvert bomb destroyed a Saracen armoured vehicle near Crossmaglen. In Bandit country, Toby Harnden's landmark study of the area, the verdict is stark. After that attack, the British Army effectively gave up the use of the roads in South Armagh. In 1976, southern County Armagh was declared off-limits to routine military vehicle traffic. The RUC later acknowledged that no mobile patrol had operated in the area without Army support since 1975. This wasn't a total ban. Heavily armed convoys and controlled ground movements still happened, especially in the later years. But the routine business of the garrison, food, ammunition, mail, fuel, soldiers, went by air, and it went by air for more than 2 decades. Harnden records that virtually all military movement in South Armagh was by helicopter. Even the base's rubbish was flown out. The official end-of-campaign report on Operation Banner put it in plain terms. Vehicles couldn't be risked on the roads, so most movements were conducted by air. Bessbrook Mill, a former linen mill near Newry, became the hub of this airbridge, described in documentary accounts as the busiest heliport in Europe, with around 600 helicopter movements a week. Wessex and Puma transports, Gazelle and Lynx scouts, and heavy-lift Chinooks shuttled constantly between Bessbrook and the border bases. The policy drew criticism from politicians and some soldiers, who argued that abandoning the roads handed South Armagh to the IRA by default. The alternative was a drive through country where every culvert could be hiding a bomb. The helicopters themselves were never safe. The IRA attacked British Army helicopters at least 23 times during the Troubles and brought down 5. In June 1988, a Lynx was shot down near Cashel Loch Upper. In February 1991, a Lynx hauling an underslung load from Bessbrook to Crossmaglen was hit by 9 rounds from heavy and general-purpose machine guns and forced to crash land in a field. The crew survived, and the aircraft was lifted out by a Chinook. By 1994, the only way the Army felt it could move troops safely across South Armagh was in the big Chinooks, aircraft too large and too fast for the weapons the IRA could bring to bear. The helicopters made the base possible. They also made it a target. Above the town, the Army built a second fortress, this one in the sky. In 1986, under operations codenamed Condor and Magistrate, British forces erected a ring of hilltop observation posts across South Armagh. The count varies from source to source. Toby Harnden says 10, other accounts say 11 or 12. Crossmaglen itself, scarcely more than a main square and a crossroads, was overlooked by three of them. The towers began as small huts on flimsy scaffolding. Over the years, they were rebuilt into substantial installations, fitted with video cameras, still cameras, telescopes, computers and communications aerials, each with helicopter refueling points. The design was consistent. 1 or 2 soldiers on the exposed lookout platform, and 30 to 40 personnel living and working in fortified bunkers below. Helicopters landed 3 or 4 times a day to keep each post supplied, so the noise and rotor dust of the airbridge never quite left the hills. This was the largest concentration of watchtowers in Northern Ireland. Locals called them spy towers. The towers changed the security calculus, but they couldn't solve the deeper problem. Even with the towers watching, the South Armagh IRA remained exceptionally resistant to infiltration. A tower on a bare hill can be seen by everyone in the valley. It was a symbol of occupation as much as an instrument of surveillance. In 1992 came the final piece, directly above the town. A cube-shaped, bullet- and missile-proof observation post was lifted into place about 20 feet above Crossmaglen police station. One account records that it was built to stand guard over officers and soldiers who could only travel in and out of the base by helicopter. The IRA attacked it on countless occasions, with homemade mortars fired from the backs of tractors. The physical geography explains the fortress. The human geography explains the war. South Armagh earned its label early. In the mid-1970s, Northern Ireland Secretary Merlin Rees publicly described the area as bandit country, and the name stuck. Inside the army, it became standard shorthand. The label captured a real demographic reality. Crossmaglen sits in the most intensely nationalist corner of Northern Ireland. The clearest figures come from the censuses after the conflict. In 2001, 97% of the town's population came from a Catholic background. In 2011, the figure was 96.27%, and 73% described their national identity as Irish. Troubles-era figures at town level were never published in that detail, but the character of the place was never in doubt. A 1973 RTE documentary reported from Crossmaglen as deep in Republican territory, adding that the Queen's writ does not run here. The report noted that British soldiers believed the IRA had the tacit support of a large percentage of the local population. A decade later, in 1983, Labour MP Claire Short made the point from the floor of the Commons. It's ridiculous that British troops are here in Crossmaglen. The claim is that they're in Ireland, keeping the peace between the two communities. But there is only one community in South Armagh, so what the heck are they doing here? For the army, the operational consequence was stark. South Armagh was close to an intelligence blank. A study of British intelligence during the Troubles describes the area in the mid-1970s as roughly analogous to the no-go areas of Belfast and Londonderry in the early 1970s. Ground the army didn't enter lightly, and about which it knew very little. The same study records that up to 1976, the score in South Armagh stood at 49 security force dead and not a single IRA fatality. The lack of intelligence was especially noticeable. Toby Harnden rendered the Republican view in a single sentence. For the IRA, Crossmaglen was their stronghold, the capital of the de facto independent Republic of South Armagh. The numbers show what that meant in practice. Informers were rare, and the social price of informing was severe. The South Armagh Brigade retained its old battalion structure rather than adopting the cell system imposed on the rest of the IRA after repeated intelligence failures, precisely because the close rural community and dense family ties made infiltration almost impossible. Denied local intelligence, the army went covert. In 1977, it formed close observation platoons. Soldiers trained to lie hidden for days at a time, watching suspect houses and arms caches. The SAS ran observation posts that could last up to 120 hours, with operators barely moving. This was the world of the covert observation post, the world this channel explored in 11 days in a hedge. And it was a world built for country exactly like South Armagh. The risks were exposed in July 1981 when the IRA ambushed a covert observation post near Glasdrumman, southwest of Crossmaglen. After that, British commanders concluded it wasn't worth risking soldiers' lives to stop the IRA setting up roadblocks. Hiding an operation from the eyes of a town this tightly knit proved nearly impossible. There were exceptions. The SAS mounted successful ambushes in South Armagh in 1976 and 1977, and technical surveillance did produce results. But the broad picture held for the whole conflict. The garrison of Crossmaglen stood watch in the middle of a town that didn't accept its presence, among people who wouldn't help it, in a landscape where any observer could be an enemy. All of this produced a posting unlike any other in the British Army. In 2000, The Guardian reported that Crossmaglen was still seen as the most dangerous posting anywhere in the world for British troops. A sign at the entrance to the town welcomed visitors. Plaques recorded the names of the dead. Toby Harnden described what the place meant to the men sent there: a landscape of hostility, isolation, and the constant threat of death, where every gorsebush, stone wall, cowshed, or bale of hay could conceal a bomb, and where a sniper's round could arrive without warning. To the army, the town was XMG, 3 letters in a movement order. To the soldier assigned there, it was the hardest tour in the British order of battle. Northern Ireland tours ran on a roulement system, with units rotating through postings of roughly 6 months. A Crossmaglen tour carried a different weight. Memoirs that survive from soldiers who served at Cross from the early 1970s through to 2004 in the dying days of Operation Banner are consistent on the essentials. Everything arrived by helicopter. Contact with the local population was minimal, and the days were counted off in private. No single veteran left the exact phrase in print. The sentiment saturates the record regardless. The countdown in a Crossmaglen tour wasn't to the end of 6 months, but to the day you flew out of the town. One paratrooper memoir from the early 70s recalled the reception in a single contrast with friendlier postings, a place where nobody spoke to the soldiers. The danger was specific. The South Armagh snipers used Barrett M82 rifles, and they used them inside the village. The IRA made a road sign for the area that became a Republican icon: Sniper at Work. The base itself was a target, and by 1994 the strain showed. Irish government papers from that year record the morale of the soldiers at Crossmaglen at a low ebb. The threat behind that phrase was the Mark 15 mortar, the barrack buster, a 1-metre gas cylinder packed with around 70 kilograms of homemade explosive, fired from the back of a tractor and able to reach the base from safe ground. On the 20th of March 1994, an IRA unit fired a mortar at the base. A Lynx helicopter was hovering over the helipad that evening. The helicopter crashed inside the base. A Grenadier Guards patrol saw the fireball from a mile away. A constable trapped in the wreckage was pulled out just before the fuel and ammunition began to explode. Toby Harnden called the attack the most successful IRA operation against a helicopter in the course of the Troubles. Units rated postings within South Armagh on an internal scale. One base nearby was known to soldiers as the softest posting in the area. Everyone understood where Crossmaglen sat on the same scale. The worst of it came in the years before the ceasefire. From 1st January 1989 to 31st of August 1994, there were 124 recorded attacks on the security forces within Crossmaglen itself. In the last 2 years of that period, 9 soldiers and police officers were killed by snipers. And even as the pressure peaked, the army was still building. In early 1994, months before the ceasefire, it launched Operation Rectify, the largest British air-mobile operation since D-Day, to rebuild and reinforce the Crossmaglen base. 150 RUC officers and 1,000 soldiers were deployed to protect construction crews across the border facilities, and every road in Crossmaglen was checkpointed for the duration. The fortress was being enlarged at almost the exact moment the war was about to stop. In August 1994, the IRA called a ceasefire. It collapsed in 1996, and in February 1997, a sniper killed Lance Bombardier Stephen Restorick near Bessbrook, the last British soldier to die in Northern Ireland during Operation Banner. The second ceasefire, in July 1997, held. The Good Friday Agreement of 1998 committed the British government to dismantling the security apparatus of the conflict. The demilitarization of Crossmaglen took the best part of a decade. In 1999, the army announced it would return the land it had taken from the Crossmaglen Rangers. On the 4th of August 2000, the Baruki Sangar was demolished. The hilltop watchtowers followed in phases. The first, Romeo 12 on Sugarloaf Hill, began coming down on the 29th of July 2005, the day after the IRA's statement formally ending its armed campaign. The Independent Monitoring Commission, which tracked the process, recorded closures through 2005 and 2006. In April 2006, work began on the last 5 posts on Camlock Mountain, Jonesborough Hill and Crossleave. In all, 13 towers came off the South Armagh skyline between 1999 and 2006. The removal wasn't uncontested. On the 9th of December 2001, around 100 Republicans attacked 2 of the remaining towers with petrol bombs and then stormed the Crossmaglen police station, leaving 21 PSNI officers, 3 soldiers and 3 police dogs injured. The riot followed a protest over the slow pace of the demilitarization the British government had promised, a sign of how much the structures themselves had come to mean. The final tower came down in February 2007, the cube above Crossmaglen Police Station, lifted away by crane, described at the time as the last British Army watchtower in South Armagh. On 31st of March 2007, the last soldiers withdrew. The Irish Times noted there would be no official farewell after more than 30 years, in what had been one of the most dangerous postings in the world. In August 2007, Operation Banner, the longest continuous campaign in British Army history, formally ended. The base didn't disappear overnight. It continued as a PSNI station and remained for years Northern Ireland's most fortified police station. But the ground itself was given back. By 2018, the land taken from the GAA Club in 1970 had been returned to the Rangers. In 2021, a policing review recommended closing the Crossmaglen station altogether, concluding that it does not provide a positive or effective policing presence. The station is now scheduled for closure and disposal. The square today is the same shape it always was. Cardinal Thomas O'Fiach Square, named for the local man who became Roman Catholic primate of all Ireland, holds a Republican memorial at its centre. A small tourist information office stands in the square, on ground where many British soldiers and Republicans lost their lives. The GAA pitch hosts Crossmaglen Rangers again, and the helicopters don't land on it anymore. You can drive into Crossmaglen now. The roads that once dictated the shape of a British military campaign are just roads. The towers are gone from the hills. The cube is gone from above the station. The Alamo is gone from the square. For the best part of 4 decades, that drive would have been almost unthinkable. The British Army garrisoned this town for 37 years, from 1970 to 2007, and then, quietly, it stopped having to. Crossmaglen is once again what it was before the Troubles, a market town on the border. Once it was the most dangerous town in Ireland. Now it's just Cross.